Welcome, everybody. This is our third and final session on our Construction Plus 101 series. Today's session is focused on apprenticeship and industry partnerships. My name is Mary McCrae. I'm the Associate Director of Coaching for the DOL Impact Team at Youth Build Global. I have the wonderful job of working with technical assistance coaches at all the DOL programs that we provide the technical assistance for. Antonio?
Hi, good afternoon and good morning, everyone. My name is Antonio McCoy. I have the pleasure of serving as the Senior Director of Workforce Development here at Youth Build Global, and really excited about today's discussion and panel.
Just want to review our session goals. By the end of this session, ideally, you'll all understand the role of our pre-apprenticeship C+ pathway within the registered apprenticeship and workforce ecosystems. You'll have learned how industry partnerships support career pathway entry and advancement, and you'll be able to identify strategies to strengthen connections between C+ pathways and employer industry partners. Our agenda is pretty simple. Antonio and I will be setting the stage, giving a little bit of background information, looking at Youth Build's role as a pre-apprenticeship model, and then we will be jumping in with our panel, three of your colleagues from Youth Build programs that have made kind of their first steps into the registered apprenticeship pathways within their C+ path.
So, before we jump into specific strategies or examples, I want to spend a few minutes grounding us in why this discussion matters in the first place. When we talk about construction plus pathways, employer alignment, and registered apprenticeship, we're really talking about how programs create intentional connections between training and long-term opportunity. Registered apprenticeships and industry partnerships matter because they help create clear transitions from learning into employment. They give participants a structured pathway forward instead of leaving them to figure out the next step on their own. At the same time, these relationships position youth build programs as active workforce system partners, not just training providers, but real contributors to local talent pipelines and workforce strategies. And finally, strong employer engagement strengthens long term commitment from industry partners. And we want employers invested not only in hiring participants, but in helping shape training, supporting advancement, and seeing youth build programs as part of their workforce solution. So, one of the most important things for programs to remember is that Youth Build is already positioned well within this conversation. Youth Build is recognized as a pre apprenticeship model, and that matters because it validates much of the work programs should already be doing. Programs should be providing hands on skills based learning tied to industry expectations, helping participants build career readiness, technical competencies, and durable skills, and preparing young people not only for jobs, but for continued advancement into apprenticeship, post secondary training, and long term careers. Sometimes programs underestimate how valuable that positioning really is within that broader workforce ecosystem. This isn't about trying to become something completely different. It's really about strengthening and formalizing the connections that should already exist within the youth build model. So I also want to connect this conversation directly to federal guidance because this work is not separate from workforce system expectations. Under WIOA regulations, youth build programs funded through DOL are recognized as pre-apprenticeship programs. And when you look at the elements outlined in the regulations, we see alignment with the work many programs are doing as they strengthen their construction plus pathways. The regulations emphasize things like training aligned with employer skill needs, career counseling and supportive services, meaningful hands on learning, industry recognized credentials, and direct connections to registered apprenticeship opportunities. What's important here is that these expectations reinforce that strong pathway development is not just about adding credentials or employer names to a proposal. It's about creating an intentional system that connects education, training, supportive services, and advancement opportunities together. We're also seeing continued national emphasis around apprenticeship and skilled trades through Executive Order 14278. The priorities outlined here reinforce a few key themes: expanding access to registered apprenticeship, strengthening employer led workforce pipelines, and connecting training directly to quality employment opportunities. And honestly, this aligns very naturally with the role Youth Build can play. Youth Build programs are uniquely positioned because they already work with populations that often need structured pathways, supportive services, and meaningful opportunities to reconnect to education and careers. So when programs strengthen apprenticeship alignment and industry partnerships, they're not moving away from the youth build model. In many ways, they're actually deepening it. And with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Mary to begin today's panel discussion.
So I'd like to welcome Corey, Jarrell, and Rocio to be our panel of experts around registered apprenticeship and C+. So would like to ask each of you to introduce yourself, and I'll just go by my screen. So Corey, I'll start with you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Corey Rich from Operation Fresh Start in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm the director of our Legacy program, which is our Youth Building Core Network affiliated program, and our Conservation Academy, which is an advanced level conservation training program.
Rel.
Jarrell Morton, Director of Job Point's Youth Build Program out of Columbia, Missouri.
And Rocio.
Rocio Campos from Sur Metro Detroit, Sur Youth Build Learning Academy. I am the Director of Education and Vocations and the Superintendent for our high school. We do have a charter school.
Well, thank you all. Our first question is, how did you initially approach employers or industry partners to secure support for your C+ pathway and the apprenticeship opportunities? Corey, I'll start with you.
So we kind of had like a long pathway to it. So we had been doing conservation and urban forestry work with Dane County Parks as a partner for many years before we considered it as a C+ pathway. It was just something that was part of like a secondary part of our program. But we had, been building that relationship and doing more and more work. And their reputation started to grow in that industry. We expanded to a second crew with Dane County Parks. The city of Madison approached us and we started a crew with them and then expanded to a second crew. So there's just a ton of momentum around it for us. We realized there were a lot of job opportunities there. So it was this really gradual process for us. And we realized folks were viewing us as an employment pipeline, so the C+ was a natural fit, and working on that pre-apprenticeship was a natural fit to make sure folks had the skills necessary to like matriculate into jobs.
Thank you. Jarrell.
For us, it was avoiding the recreation of the wheel. We had previously hosted a highway maintenance and repair career pathway for adults. And so we leveraged those partnerships and systems into a C+ path for our youth build program. And so that, again, was a high income pathway and sort of drew the attention of our young people looking to have income be their stepping stone out of their unique situations at home.
Thank you. Lucia.
So for us, this is our second Construction Plus program. But for both of them, we have really garnered the relationship that we've had with employers. And in our city, the city had identified several buckets, and healthcare was one of them. So that's how we leveraged that, the employers and the relationship we already had, to come up with the pathway that we decided to do.
Good. Antonio?
So I want to continue building on, this piece here. And Rosie, I'll start with you. What factors or value propositions resonated most with the employers or other stakeholders that helped move that partnership from interest to a full out commitment?
I think for us, it has been the relationship we've had with the employers, making sure they come out, meet with the young people. So there's an investment from both sides, and look at our young people as a pipeline, right? Really look at this as you're going to get some quality individuals that are going to be working with alongside you. So that relationship has really, been fostered through our organization. I will also say that, it will be the ongoing case management that happens with our young people, the employer knowing that there's always they're always going to be supported throughout their journey. It's also an important factor, as well as us understand that there's going to have to be some flexibility on our end to make sure that the employer is getting what they need. So in case we do need to pivot, also understanding that. So it's really about the relationship that you're building with the employer.
Thank you, Jarrell.
So for us, it was building a win-win sort of system. bringing the employer to the table to help design the training, and then also leveraging that pipeline that Rocio had mentioned. The employers get an elongated interview process with the ongoing support of the youth build placement team to ensure that that's a solid placement for the young people. And then for that mutual like funding stream in which we could leverage as the construction companies were petitioning for an I-70 project. They were able to address the portion of the application that reference underserved populations by being connected with our youth build program. So it's it's always been a win-win arrangement, and like I said, just continuing to build out those relationships can open up various opportunities for Construction Plus pathways.
Thank you. Corey.
I'll echo the win-win sentiment. So, first and foremost, we in Madison, we've got a lot of public lands. There's a ton of work that needs to be done all the time, and we get to serve as, a cheaper alternative for people to complete that work, frankly. We're a good value proposition from that standpoint. So, we got a reputation as an organization that can get a lot of stuff done for less than it would cost to do it otherwise. So that's very helpful. Also echo Rocio's sentiment about we're a strong recruitment pipeline for our partners. That value for them, they get to witness our young folks on the work site throughout their term, and it gets to serve as a super long-term interview process. So whenever our folks are applying for those positions, they they're known, and the quality of their work precedes their application. So that's been a huge success. And then as far as like the apprenticeship side of it, we were able to kind of work in tandem alongside the state when they were developing their urban forestry apprenticeship. We were able to do that at the exact same time to make sure that our programming aligns with the apprenticeship model. And it's just like a win-win. Our folks get the training to then be able to go directly into that full-blown apprenticeship if they so choose.
Great, thank you. So we'll start with Rocio this time. So what's the high impact practices that have been most effective in maintaining strong, active, and sustainable employer industry partnerships over time? So like what are you doing to make sure that those relationships are still here in a year or 2 years or 3 years?
Absolutely. I will say that consistent communication, making sure you're communicating with them, good or bad, your success of the program, treating our employers as strategic partners is really important, right? Sitting down with them and saying, hey, what's going on, what's new, right? Because we're not we're not in the front lines with them, making sure that we understand and we stay up to date with them. And one thing that I will say with our team, we've been very fortunate to be able to respond to issues quickly. There is an issue at the site or with a young person, whatever it is, to respond to them quickly, and not just let it simmer. I will say that also inviting them to your event, inviting them to graduation, making sure you're sharing your outcomes with them, will really help that relationship. Even if there's a transition in their team, making sure that you know who the next person is, right? And once again, it starts all over again. You're guarding that relationship.
So just to follow up on this is that this is also about it's that individual relationship. So it's not even necessarily it's the relationship with the larger employer, but it's making sure that you have that relationship with the individual and making sure that again there's a just on your side also
Correct.
that as an individual that there's somebody else who's gonna like step into those shoes and has relationship there.
Correct. And making sure that it's a two-way street, right? There's communication both sides. If any issues on your end, you tell them and vice versa. and just being sometimes that listening ear for them because they are young people could be a little bit complicated sometimes. They come with a lot. So no, for them to know that your staff is there, that you are there for them.
Excellent. Corey.
Rocio nailed a lot of that. A lot of the things I was going to say. Communication is definitely key. We have like a challenge amongst our crew supervisors to try to like over communicate to our partners because I've never once gone into a partnership meeting and somebody been like, man, they just communicate way too much to me. So like nailing that communication piece is huge. Also, as Rocio spoke to, building that relationship, both between you and the partner, but also like that partner and the young people and the impact that their work is having on them. I'll echo like inviting folks to graduations in our gala, and making the relationship feel much more than transactional, like allowing them to witness firsthand that transformation that occurs. We've gotten feedback from our employer partners that like that is the like one of the highlights that people mention on their like employment surveys is getting to go to those kind of events and having the good feels about the work that they're doing alongside our folks. And we've also had really high impact by just making sure that we're constantly looking to improve our programming, both from a staff and a participant standpoint, making sure we're able to keep growing and do more and more over time. That's really opened up some cool opportunities for us. So I'll speak to like prescribed fire has become a really big thing for us. We get to participate in a lot of prescribed fire, and that was a goal that I had 5 years ago. We never really got to do that. This year, one of our crews burnt over 1,000 acres of land over the month of April, which was really really fun. The crew enjoyed it, but it was also the partners were like grateful to have that kind of help. So yeah, those are what we're trying.
When you said prescribed fire, I was more about the fires in a youthville program. So Jarrell.
Okay, so for us, it's been a combination of things. So, developing an employer council has been valuable in exchanging some of the cutting edge technology that's being injected into the industry, what are current hiring trends. All of that comes into play when shaping out that relationship and keeping your program relevant. Employer surveys, of course, there that could sort of be played out in sort of today's environment, but still trying to create various avenues to maintain communication between employer and organization. And then, as mentioned in previous responses, not moving beyond the transactional sort of dumping ground. Here goes kids, take them, take them, take them. No, we're continuing to shape their skill set and build out the relationship to create new avenues for expanding the partnership.
No, thank you. So I'm really excited to hear about the level of engagement and that intentional engagement and relationship building that's taking place between your programs and the employers. And one of the things that we often know as far as that process that we have successes and those strong points. And those high impact practices, but oftentimes we realize or we come to find those high impact practices because we possibly had to overcome barriers or hurdles along the way of building those relationships. So just wondering, could you discuss briefly what barriers did you encounter in building or sustaining those employer partnerships over time, and how did your program respond to those challenges? And I'll start with Corey.
Yeah, I think we had maybe 6, 7 years ago, a new person stepped into the role at Dane County Parks that kind of oversaw our contract. And it was a new experience for them. And, they witnessed a couple of our like not best days. We got out there and like we weren't setting the world on fire those days. And, uh, it was an opportunity that could have gone one of two ways. Like he could have looked to like really reduce the work that we were doing together, Uh, Fortunately, he decided to meet with us. We talked. We were able to kind of explain our program model, set expectations for what we're capable of, and talk to him about the reality of our programming, which is that, like, working with young people. Yeah, we'll have a few bad days here and there. We're also going to have stellar days, and on the whole, we're going to be a above average level of production. And he bought into that, and it took a little while to, I think, win him over, but he was instrumental in expanding us to a second crew. He then became an advocate for us to launch our advanced conservation training program. He now speaks at our galas. The guy, like, you couldn't have a better cheerleader for Operation Fresh Start than I'll shout out Shane Otto at Dane County Parks. Yeah, the guy is amazing. So, like, we've had those kind of bumps. I'll also say one of our challenges we run up against annually is timing. So conservation has seasonal hiring. Spring season is hiring season. So it's been tough to, like, create these opportunities outside of that spring season for our folks that their graduation doesn't align with that spring date. So we've been able to work, alongside some of our employers to open up internships, in the fall, things like that. But we haven't quite cracked that, and, like, we still get bottlenecked in spring. But it's great to have partners that are, like, willing to tackle those kind of barriers alongside us and recognize, the pinch points that they cause.
No, I love that level of responsiveness and turning, those situations into really a strength for the organization, it sounds like, in terms of that partnership. Jarrell, anything else to add?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So tons of challenges, especially with the highway maintenance and repair pathway, with the youth build population coming in at a younger and younger age. It's difficult finding that ideal candidate to send down that pathway. And then looking at overall circumstances, are they ready to leave home? Because with the highway maintenance or heavy equipment in operation pathway, oftentimes you you're going to be away from home, and sometimes home is 2 to 3 weeks. That could stretch into 3 months, depending on the project. It's definitely um, shifted to more of our 21 plus crowd, but again, our average youth build age tends to sit in that 17 and a half. And so, similar to what Corey had mentioned, the timing of the industry is really crucial. Are young people ready at the height of the hiring season to be able to transition into that career pathway? Sometimes the timing lines up perfectly, but in the wonderful world of youth build, change is always waiting on change. And so there have been periods where young people had to stay on a little bit longer, waiting for that hiring season. So being able to modify how we handle our program internally to still prepare those young people and get them connected to employment opportunities within the industry. So the uniqueness of that. And then my last thing would be something that I believe all of us on the call battle with is the legalization of marijuana, or the continued use of marijuana amongst our student demographics. And so helping shape that mentality away from active using to, hey, what are your long-term goals, and how does that choice align with this career pathway? And so, yeah.
No, those are some really, unique but very interesting barriers that you bring up. I want to circle back really quick to particularly to that one in terms of the readiness of the young person to leave home, in terms of that travel. I was wondering, do you all do any type of work to prepare those employees? Because I imagine when they're traveling with the employer, um there's still some case management or some management of behaviors or expectations that has to take place. What does that look like in terms of making sure that it's a successful experience for both parties?
Yes, it still falls into our supportive services. being able to provide that transportation when needed, or if there is a food insecurity, being able to utilize resources outside of federal funds to aid a young person that's working to that first official paycheck. And so being supportive, available for case management calls when the industry kicks something their way that they're maybe not prepared for, the long work hours, the weather, the monotony of it all, and then the the maturity that's needed to transition away from home. Sometimes those are phone calls that come outside of the typical work hour, just to keep that young person grounded and encouraged in the career path in which they've chosen.
No, thank you for that. I love that kind of that responsiveness in terms of being the resource, obviously, for the employer in that partnership, but maintaining our role as a resource for those young people. I think is exciting to hear, particularly with these unique type of experiences, right? So
Yeah.
no, thank you for that. Rocio, what about you all?
Sure. Had to do everything that Joel said as far as like the marijuana, like all that, the background checks for us, when especially when it comes to healthcare. I will say that our younger population is the most difficult and the most ones that we tend to have the most barriers with. Getting to know, making sure that they are fully prepared to go into a CNA training, and they're going to go out and actually these are humans that they're taking care of, and making sure that they're fully prepared, right? Once you get a little bit older, you get more mature, and it changes a little bit of that. But I think in our case, we take our older population, right, and have them mentor the younger population when it comes to the young person. I think that also the timing to finish the credential sometimes could be a little bit difficult because it is a very once you start the training, you go on for 3 full weeks of bookwork and hands-on, and it kind of, there's some wiggle room towards, for the additional time, but there's 3 full weeks that our young people are really, really hitting that credential piece really hard, and they're not able to miss any days. So it isn't, we got to make sure before they start that 3 weeks, that we have eliminated a lot of those barriers that they have, and transportation set up for them. Everything is set up for them because they're not able to miss for 3 full weeks, which could be a lot for a young person.
Thank you.
To follow up on this a little bit around some of the barriers and challenges, I'm curious that as you've all been very successful in trying to get those placements with those employers and really work with them. And as you have started thinking about or starting to move and are moving into that registered apprenticeship world, how much more of a barrier are things like ages and not being drug free, or the educational attainment, those kinds of things? What are there additional things that are coming up as you're starting to really move into that registered apprenticeship formal placement? And I'll open it up to any of the three of you that want to start us off.
I was gonna say age is definitely a challenge for us, especially folks that are trying to get a job that's going to require chainsaw use, brush cutter use, things like that, are going to need to be 18 by rule. Our population has been younger and younger for our applicants over the last several years. So yeah, age is tough. Education is also kind of a constant challenge the industry requires, often for not a great reason, a bachelor's degree in some places. I'll talk a little bit about that in a later answer, but that's been a challenge that we're working hard to help tear down.
Well,
Yeah, and for us, it still rolls back to the age, with the level of difficulty and also the danger that comes with working with highway crews. 18 is sort of that threshold, and what we have done is sort of stair stepped our young people into that career pathway. So they may have started with the residential construction with the interest in highway maintenance and repair. And so we start them there to give them time to get older, and gain some of those basic skills around construction. And then there's a lot of overlap between the two industries. And so it cuts down on the training cycle for our young people, and of course gives them time to be able to fit age wise into a placement.
Thank you for all of that, because I think again those are the challenges that we're seeing across the field, is particularly around the age, and being able to move and get those credentials, and seeing where the placement opportunities are. On the other side of that, how did you work with um, your registered apprenticeship partners, with your employer partners, around kind of when the timing of the placement might work best, from their perspective? Again, that we're seeing, the 12 months of follow up, and obviously you all are looking to get that quarter 2, quarter 4 placement, and now moving into uh, the next grant class, would be the registered apprenticeship performance measure that will be coming online. So I'm kind of curious where, kind of like, what's the entry point, and how have you worked with those employers, those registered apprenticeship partners, around, hey, my young person's not ready for another 6 months or another 12 months?
About having that open communication, Mary, but also being able, so all of the apprenticeship have timelines, right? And for us as a program is to be able to map it out backwards and try, right, our best to be able to align it. And if we're not able to align it, right, it's having that open communication, because sometimes there is some wiggle room that we're able to say, okay, we're gonna set aside these many slots for your young people. And just being able to, once again, having that open communication with the employer to be able to have that set aside for the young, for your program. And making sure our instructors, and that means our CNA instructors as well as our construction instructors, having that communication with that employer, right? We have, the business service representatives and stuff like that that work with the apprenticeship team. But our instructors are also in communication with them, and they know who's kind of come in through the door. And we have a young person that is really going to be a success, that is really going to be tied into that apprenticeship, so they'll be able to stay them as long.
Diversifying your types of employer partners, so not just leaning on necessarily one particular employer to sort of work with your young people, sort of creating a tier system, for lack of a better term, where of course the high performers that are age appropriate and ready to transition, they would sort of take those higher paying positions that involve more traveling. Those that are still on the younger end of side and younger end of it, and not necessarily ready for all the travel, connecting with our city partner, because that'll keep everything local for them to roll into employment. And then sort of having that hybrid. Yes, they travel, but a bulk of their projects are locally, and being able to place someone that is sort of on the fence on whether or not they want to be away from home for an extended period of time with that type of employer. And then as we ramp up to get them ready to transition into a long-term placement under the register apprenticeship model, having a work site on site within the program, so that they can practice on their skill sets before making that leap into the registered apprenticeship model and connected to employer partners.
Great, thank you. Corey.
So I think, one way that we were able to create those like clear pathways to placement and registered apprenticeship was mentioned earlier. We were able to design our pre-apprenticeship in tandem with the state apprenticeship for urban forestry, which is really useful for making sure that our programming aligns with what those organizations that were on the apprenticeship, the registered apprenticeship side, were looking for applicants. A few other things that we've been able to do, I'll agree with uh, Jarrell as far as kind of a tiered employer system. So your high performers taking those best opportunities, and we prep people and talk to them about like kicking in the door for people behind you, like get in there and knock knock it out of the park, and that way the floodgates open and people can come in behind you. But we also let them know like you can also slam that door shut. So we help we can communicate the importance of being like a pioneer for our organization into a new partner. Uh, Other thing that we've done that's been really successful is we worked with some of our employer partners to get MOUs to guarantee interviews for our graduates for positions they apply for. That's been awesome. That's really helped. Some of the conservation positions, they'll get hundreds of applicants, and at times, like the first step for them to go through their selection processes, they like throw away half the resumes at random because it's too much to process through. So like to have our people be guaranteed a seat at that table in an interview is massive. We've also worked extensively with those partners to try to remove some of those barriers I mentioned, especially around education earlier. Uh, Conservation industries had this artificial barrier of a bachelor's degree forever. And you look at the jobs, they're manual labor positions. It's running a chainsaw, it's applying pesticide, things like that, things that do not require a college degree. So working with our partners to help like recognize where those historical barriers have been put in place and to like tear those down or to create access by like including things like community college and or completion of a training program like Operation Fresh Start as a minimum requirement have really opened our folks up to some awesome opportunities.
Corey, did you have to do that at the state level, or so some advocacy to get that changed at that level, or at the local level?
As far as the minimum requirements,
Yeah.
I'm still working on the state. We city and county so far. I've gotten it changed on several jobs, and some of that was just through like saying yes to anything they would ever invite me to. I got invited on some of their like position description reviews that they were doing internally,
Hmm.
which I was really excited to be part of. And then I could be a squeaky wheel about how they had this artificial barrier that kept, you know, that minimized their hiring pools. Like, man, you say you want to hire my people, like they're not going to come with an environmental science degree right away. So yeah, yeah, state and federal is the next goal, get those barriers down. But so far we got the city and the county taken care of.
Great.
I really love the intentionality I'm hearing in these responses, in terms of, one, the intentional, finding the right partners and working with them and being responsive and realizing that it is really a two-way street in building that relationship that ultimately will open the door. And then also think the strategic thinking about, where we're potentially sending our young people for those placement opportunities, right? And just for a quick plug, for anyone that's also thinking about ways that they might take a similar approach in your own program, I just want to refer you to the placement scaffold tool that's available out of Workforce GPS, because some of the things that Corey and Jarrell just mentioned in terms of thinking about the readiness of a young person for a potential opportunity are outlined in that tool, and just another resource for you as you're thinking about your own placement strategies or in terms of connecting young people to those registered apprenticeship and career entry opportunities. So, what it really, as we're continuing to break down this registered apprenticeship discussion, and realizing that you all have spoken already about partners being a major part of this process. and obviously employers are a part of it. Your programs are a part of it. But one of the things we talk about with registered apprenticeship is that it's a multifaceted. There are a multiple number of partners who may be required in order for these opportunities to actually come to fruition for our young people. So just as thinking about your program and the connections to registered apprenticeship, who or what are some of the partners um, that were essential in making registered apprenticeship or your other employment placement opportunities possible? And how did you develop those partnerships? Because I think that's the sticking point for some people sometimes in terms of building out. Like it's not just knowing who to talk to, but how do you engage, particularly, if it's an organization or stakeholder that you haven't talked to before. So, Jarrell, I'll start with you on this one. Who are some of those partners and how did you develop the partnership?
Okay. So one of the key players in our development was the workforce board, the local workforce board. They're already committed to the Youth Build program by law, so leveraging those resources and sort of braiding them into the partnership discussion can help strengthen your call to the employer partners to open the doors for your youth build participants. And so whether it's a paid work experience or an on the job training that's structured through that WIOA collaborative that places them with an employer partner and leads to the employer partner stepping up and officially hiring that young person, and then the employer being connected to the workforce provider and being able to get up to 50% of the youth build participant's salary reimbursed for 6 months. And so just having those type of connections and discussions with all parties that are involved can help create a strong system for your youth build participants to benefit from. And so what helped encourage that relationship was sitting on the board. So, understanding what new programs and what initiatives the workforce provider was pushing, and being able to leverage that knowledge into something internally for the youth build participants has been fruitful for us.
So can you tell us a little bit more about just kind of even in what does participation look like for you all as it relates to your that local workforce development board and your engagement?
So we have taken an extra step to have them officially housed within our facility. So as we transition through our youth build orientation, young people that are eligible to be dually enrolled with those services are instantly connected. So it takes our supportive service package and it expands it exponentially, because now we're not just leaning on what we can do as an organization or as a program. Now we have an entirely new network of funds to ensure the overall success of a young person, especially as we look toward placement. And then when we take a look at like the education high set attainment, the WIOA partner is they're able to incentivize the various benchmarks to keep a young person engaged in the learning process, and acknowledging each one of those tiers that they hit with sort of a return on that investment monetarily. And so just braiding they're a part of us, we're a part of them. We're seeking some of the same performance standards, so we can win as a team, and instead of a sort of a siloed approach, which puts us out hunting down resources to better prepare our young people. Let's bring them in. Let's invite them to the table, and they eat as we eat. And having that relationship will help strengthen your outcomes for your program, and it reaches the students directly.
Thank you for all of that. Rocio, what's it look like for you all, and who are some of those partners, and how did you develop those partnerships?
So two of our biggest partners are both healthcare systems, the Henry Ford healthcare system as well as Corewell, they have apprenticeship programs, different ones, and our young people are able to apply to them, right? Not just CNA, there's other ones that they have. One of our biggest partner that it took us a little bit, we actually had to go out and procure was our CNA provider who is providing the actual training. So going out and making sure that they understood the population that we were working with, making sure that we had interviews, have them come out to the agency. So it took us some time to identify the partner, and we were able to identify someone who the partner was from the community, understood the young people. They were actually they're two registered nurses, and they were opportunity youth at one point themselves. So it is nice to have that. And someone who understands, understands us. And I will have to say, kind of did a little bit of Jarrell. We also run a braided model. So all of our young people are registered under WIOA funding. We run a WIOA program. So it's our case manager is not just the youth pool case manager, but it's also the WIOA case manager. Making sure that that relationship is there because it does truly augment the support systems that you're able to provide that young person.
Thank you for that. I don't know about anyone else, but I'm hearing a lot of kind of system building, system integration, which is wonderful to hear. Corey, what about you all?
So, I mean, partnerships are kind of like what we live and die on here. We don't do a whole lot alone at Operation Fresh Start. I've talked a lot about our like site work partners and our employer partners so far, but one of the big partnerships I haven't really talked about yet is our local community college, Madison College. Huge partner for us. We sit on the board of their arboriculture program. So they kicked off an arboriculture program 6 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, and we were invited to be part of that. We enthusiastically agreed to do that, and have since been able to help steer them toward registered apprenticeship, which they're launching. They're going to be an RA program in the fall of 26. So really excited to have that training available for the local industry. Previously, we were having anybody that was an apprentice in forestry was getting sent up, a couple hours away north of us here to receive that training. So that's been huge for us. Another thing I haven't really talked about at all is like private organizations. We needed a place for apprentices to land, and our local nonprofits don't always have the money to do it. Our local government organizations don't have like a formal apprenticeship necessarily that's an RA. So we worked with private arboriculture orgs to try to open those doors up. And basically me and the executive director of Fresh Start became like we were like apprenticeship salesmen. We're going like door to door setting up meetings and telling people the good word about apprenticeship and all the benefits that could potentially bring to their employees. And then the last thing I'll mention is basically any organization that that'll invite us into any space, we like occupy that space. I mentioned we sit on the board. My executive director sits on the board of Madison College. I'm on the arboriculture steering committee there as well. I'm on our local county tree board, a few nonprofit boards that are in the conservation space. Basically, if there's somebody that's doing conservation work, I want to make sure that like I'm putting my thumb on the scales and pointing them toward like workforce development and registered apprenticeship. So it's like it's saying yes to anything that I can that is going to be a worthwhile investment of time.
So I want to touch just a little deeper in terms of becoming the registered apprenticeship salesman. It sounds like, right? So what was the catalyst for that, right? Because we already talked about Youth Build obviously is a pre-apprenticeship program. We're not necessarily asking programs to become registered apprenticeship programs themselves, but in terms of engaging with those partners in your local community to tell them and convince them, what's that process been like for you all?
Yeah, it's been like good and challenging. We've had really good conversations with people that buy in right away. We've had some folks that are resistant to the idea. We're a pretty purple state, and I think sometimes people politicize apprenticeship with like with unions. So that's presented an interesting challenge, but as we get to talking to folks, basically we work alongside our the workforce development board and can like bring stats that they're providing and say like here's what's happening in other markets. Like this can be a benefit to you. And also those employers generally communicate to us that one of their top challenges is like training and retaining like competent staff. And we're like, here is a pathway to be intentional, and create a solution for yourself and that, with that problem. Like those staff aren't just gonna like materialize out of nowhere. You gotta put the work in, and we're willing to be part of that. We're willing to do our load or lift our load, be part of that solution alongside you. And people have been pretty responsive to that.
So, want to get into some of the kind of formality around formal agreements, MOUs, infrastructure agreements, all of that kind of paperwork. How much of any of that kind of formal agreement drove the clarity that sounds like you all have with your partners? Was it a driving force? Was it helpful to get things done on paper and get the leadership to sign off on these? Where there's money exchanging hands as far as funding and that kind of stuff, was that helpful to help clarify? Were there kind of challenges and glitches to those kind of formal type agreements? And I'll start with Corey.
Formal agreements and like MOUs have been big for us. I mentioned earlier we've got an MOU with the city and the county to interview our graduates that apply for positions, and that alone has opened up employment opportunities for a considerable number of young folks that maybe never would have been provided that seat at the table beforehand. So like that's been huge. We're a fee for service provider. So we're a subcontractor basically to a lot of our folks. So we enter into a lot of like long-term, contracts and agreements with folks, and that's really allowed us to future plan, which has been nice. It's allowed us to scale up for bigger projects, and then also like pursue awesome opportunities in tandem with our partners. So we pursued the Inflation Reduction Act, had a big forestry grant that we were able to pursue alongside our partners at Dane County Parks and Dane County Forestry uh, to really expand some of our programming, expose our folks to new and exciting um, like workforce training, and hopefully have good placement out of that as well. So yeah, those formal agreements can could be great for a lot of ways. Then last thing I'll say is like those agreements have led to some like informal cool things as well. Like Dane County Parks, for instance, we have this very formal agreement with them, but they have really like gotten a ton of feedback from their employees that they enjoy what they're doing with us. It's a favorite part of a lot of people's jobs. So they're hosting like these awesome exposure events for us where it's like, all right, come out, we're gonna get young people climbing trees, hoist them up 40, 50 feet in the air, get them walking across branches. We do, a big Earth Day event, things like that. And that's been really big for like generating excitement for folks to, get them applying into those jobs. And that started as like, these informal things, but they've happened year over year over year to this point to where it's like, I probably should put it in our contract at this point.
Thank you. Rocio.
I think with us, of course, we have MOUs and letter of commitments, and it has started very informal, but we have developed that MOU based on those informal things that we're doing. And it's also we want to make sure that it's very clear what the expectation of both parties are, um, including the recruitment, the outcome piece. Is there an outcome for that? You know, finishing or placement in our case for CNA partner is making sure that the process is also there if it needs to be in part of the MOU, right? Even if it's just an attachment. just to make sure that there's a clear understanding at both sides of the house, right? That if something was to happen to either side, there's a formal document that kind of guides anyone that comes in is able to pick it up and be able to run with it, right? To do what has been the great work that has been done.
Thank you. Jarrell.
So for us, the MOU was a critical step in the overall viability of our apprenticeship model. Um, we're a smaller organization, so some of the roadway equipment and heavy equipment we just couldn't afford as a smaller organization. But being able to connect um, employer partners to the training and having them involved in the conversation has helped expand our students' exposure to the different types of equipment that they will see within the industry. And I would like to give credit to our residential construction program because that helped create a doorway into our city being more aware of what we're doing as a program and who we're serving. And so that has led to lots being donated to our construction, residential construction pathway. It's opened up avenues to where now they are paying us to have that elongated interview with young people, having access to their work sites, helping to supplement their shortages, and so now young people are running right into employment opportunities just based off of a healthy relationship where we're still preaching that win-win sort of mentality as we build out even those contracts.
Super. Antonio?
Yeah, so as you're building those relationships or those partnerships, whether they're formal or informal, how do you measure or assess the strength and effectiveness of those partnerships, whether it's employers or your other apprenticeship partners? How are you assessing that over time? And I'll start with Corey.
I think, of course, like placement can be a huge, easy way to assess the strength of a partnership. Like if you're placing folks and they're being retained long term at those jobs, it's hard to beat that kind of success. And we also do a lot of with all of our partners. We do like formal annual check-ins where it's just a time to sit down and be intentional about like reviewing how the year went, what went well, what barriers we hit, what challenges we hit, how we can do better next year, and then looking a few years into the future of where we might be able to go. So that's another way we get to kind of assess that strength of the partnership. But probably the biggest thing that I do that's is like I think our staff, so me and staff folks are communicating constantly with those partners. We are like constantly talking to each other. I view that as like a really important part of what I'm doing is just having regular conversations, even if I don't have a whole lot on the docket. Like I try to find some excuse to talk to our partners to make sure that things are going well because they'll usually let me know in those moments if they aren't. But they wouldn't necessarily reach out to tell me otherwise. So it's a time where I can call. I've got some excuse, and maybe they're saying, "Hey, well, while I got you, this young person's struggling that you just placed here. You have any ideas?" And that allows us to intervene and help correct what may have otherwise ended in termination. Or sometimes they'll have like really great things to say, and I get to share that with whoever the crew supervisor that young person was, and whatever it may be. But like communication is probably like the quickest check of the pulse, just constant communication with people.
Thank you. Rocio.
I agree with Corey, 100% communication. Also, the communication between, and I said this before, that the instructors, it's key because I will say that they will get if there's a problem, there's an issue or something, they will get to the instructor first versus, someone like, myself, just because they see the instructor all the time, right? Um, and as far as measuring the success is, with the employer just comes to your stuff, right? Just comes in, of course they're going to be hiring and they're going to be, you know, as long as they say, we want more young people, we they continue to work with the program, I think that's a success. And I know it's not our Construction Plus partner, but our construction partner has been with us for 18 years. That tells you something, right? It's about guarding those relationships, right? It's about, hey, we're going to this conference. I think you should be at this conference because they're going to talk about apprenticeships or X, Y, and Z. It's also involving them in the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Jarrell.
I would say similar to what my previous response was, uh, them taking the steps to deepen their relationship with the program. So whether that's through donations, expansion on project collaborations, and even sitting on the board. And so we've seen that sort of progression from an employer partner that didn't know that we existed and that we were offering it. Now they're one of our corporate donors, and they have a constant seat on the board for the organization. So just I think that's a true testament of our mission being strong, the messaging around how that opportunity is impactful to those that we're serving. All of that has helped build that strong relationship to where they're not just there as a partner, they're a part of the entire youth build story that we're offering.
I am curious that looking at your placements and registered apprenticeship particularly, but in your long-term with long-term employers, after the 12 months of the follow-up period with your young people, how many young people, what's the kind of percentage that you're seeing they're still retaining in the same sector and moving, continuing with a registered apprenticeship, now moving into or maybe moving into a different registered apprenticeship? Just totally out of curiosity. So, Jarrell, I'll start with you.
So, what we have noticed is that as a young person grows within that industry, they encounter some of the systemic issues that still remain, that haven't really been broken down. And so that's something that we continue to work on with the employer. How do we create a stronger environment where people who not traditionally held those roles fit. And so that's where we see the biggest drop off in the responses back from the students is when I go to the work site or when I'm involved in various construction activities, there's a limited reflection of those that look like me. And so some of those barriers still are rooted within the industry. But as we continue to um, enter into those spaces, being intentional with the partners, letting them know that, hey, this is our type of student. This is how we can build out this relationship so that it is a sustainable career path for those that we're sending in that direction.
Thank you. Rocio.
I have to say that something that we also do because on the other side of the house we run an adult program through WIOA is making sure they're linked to that program. Just in the event that they need additional support, they have someone there. But once you're a youth builder, you're always a youth builder, right, Jarrell and Corey? They could always come back to our program, right? They could always come back to the staff, and the staff is going to help out as much as they can, but also linking them to other resources.
Great. Corey?
I'll start out with just echoing the sentiment that Rocio just said. Like, once a youth builder, always a youth builder. At OFS, you hear the phrase "once OFS, always OFS" like daily. So that's big, making sure that folks understand that they've got, uh, a safety net here if it's needed. As far as how people are retained within, within apprenticeships, things like that. For our folks, I don't have the stats in front of me at all, so I don't want to speak like quantitatively, but I will say qualitatively. We see a lot of our folks that are landing in the uh, apprenticeships, especially like our longstanding construction apprenticeships, retain those positions. We got a lot of folks that like it'll be a crummy rain day here. Job site gets called off, and it's not uncommon for us to have a few folks that graduated, you know, several years ago drop by to check in with a teacher or their old supervisor or just like come by to say what's up. So that's always a treat as well when you get to see your folks that have been out and away and all of a sudden they're dropping by and you're like, man, you're doing really well. I'll tell a quick story because this like warmed my heart the other day for one of our plus program folks. Guy that was on my crew when I was a crew supervisor, so he would have graduated with us 7 years ago or so. He's been in the conservation and forestry industry since. And I went to an event with my 5-year-old daughter at the zoo, and they were doing tree climbing. So they were putting kids in harnesses, pulling them up the trees. And sure enough, I get to the front of the line, and the guy that's kind of like bossing everyone around is Jaden, my old my old crew member. And I had no clue he was gonna be there. And I was like, Jaden, oh yeah, what's up? And like I've followed his career from afar. And but it was just such a cool moment to see. So when we get folks into those good opportunities, there's definitely good potential for them to stick around.
Great. And those are the kind of stories that keep us doing the work we're doing. So, so to kind of wrap up our last piece here is, what would you offer to the programs that are on here, programs that will listen to this recording in the future that are just kind of beginning to explore this whole kind of apprenticeship track and industry partnerships within their C plus partner, their C plus track? What would you offer? What would you offer up as advice? Rosie, I'll start with you.
I would say start small and build trust within your community and your partners. And I know we're a DOL program, right? But don't be scared to pivot, right? Talk to your FPO and say we need to be able to pivot.
Corey?
Similar to Rocio's advice on building trust, I'd say just be super intentional about building strong relationships that don't just feel transactional. Like bring those partners in, let them feel that youth build love, let them witness the transformation, and that's going to get them excited to deepen that relationship with you.
My response will be in connection to registered apprenticeships. You're already doing it. You're already doing it. It's paperwork that can help elevate what you're offering to your young people. And so I would encourage each of you to pick your strongest pathway and partnerships and start to have those opening conversations with your state representative for registered apprenticeships. Don't be afraid. Just take a look at the paperwork and how does that connect you stronger with your employer partner by developing an apprenticeship model.
Thanks, Jarrell. Antonio, I'll turn it over to you to close us out here.
Sure, thanks. And thank you to the panel. Like a ton of nuggets that were dropped over this last hour and some change. I just want to thank you all for the work that you're doing and the willingness to come and be the subject matter experts you are for the field at large. So thank you for really bringing this home, this series home in terms of the work that you're doing and that we're looking to expand throughout the network at large. As we begin wrapping up, I do want to leave us with a few key reflections from today's discussion. So, first, and we've heard this time and time again, that foundational to successful construction plus pathways really, is dependent on the partnerships and the strength of those partnerships that you're building as you're either expanding, enhancing, or developing your construction plus pathways. And programs cannot do this work in isolation, and you're not expected to. because you are part of a larger ecosystem that's ready, willing, and able to engage with you if you're willing to engage with it as you're preparing your young people for these opportunities. Second, strong pathways create intentional connections between training, work-based learning, and employment outcomes. The strongest partnerships are tied to real opportunities and clear next steps for participants. It's not just theoretical. And finally, Youth Build's pre-apprenticeship framework gives programs a powerful position within the workforce system. Programs have the ability to serve as meaningful on-ramps into apprenticeship and career pathways across construction and beyond. The goal is not simply participation in the workforce system. The goal really is intentional alignment that improves your participant outcomes. So as you leave today, I want to encourage you to think about what strengthening alignment could look like within your own program. One step is simply mapping your current employer and apprenticeship relationships. Who are you connected to right now, and what are the strongest relationships, but also where are the gaps? Another important question is whether those partnerships are actually leading to meaningful outcomes for your participants. Are they supporting employment or apprenticeship entry or advancement opportunities? I'd also encourage programs to identify one area where alignment could be strengthened. Maybe that's deeper employer engagement. Maybe it's formalizing some of your partnerships. Maybe it's creating stronger transitions into apprenticeship and other employment opportunities. And finally, think about how formal agreements, advisory structures, or workforce system partnerships can help create sustainability and consistency over time for your program. This work does not have to happen all at once, but intentional small steps can significantly strengthen long-term outcomes. So I also want to thank once again our panelists again for sharing their experiences and insights today. One of the strengths of this network is the willingness of programs to share what's working, talk honestly about challenges, and support one another in strengthening pathways for your participants. Please feel free to reach out to our presenters if you want to continue the conversation or learn more about some of the approaches that you may have heard today. And of course, Mary and I are always happy to continue supporting programs as you think through workforce strategies, apprenticeship alignment, employer engagement, and construction plus pathway development. So please don't hesitate to reach out, and you'll find our contact information here on this slide. Thank you all again for your time, engagement, and commitment to this work. The work programs are doing to create meaningful opportunities for Youth Build participants truly matters, and strengthening these pathways can have a lasting impact not only on participant outcomes, but on local workforce systems and communities as a whole. Thank you, everyone. And as always, we look forward to continuing this conversation. Thank you.